Wow. Wow. What a shame. The Odyssey by Homer is a masterpiece. It's easily among the best pieces of literature ever written in the history of mankind. It's so ancient and yet it's just so timeless. And yes, I do have the Odyssey here somewhere in Polish, but I didn't really have time to look for it. But I did get the Iliad recently though in English, which is also a masterpiece, but whatever, the Iliad and the Odyssey are the masterpieces, and again, among the greatest pieces of literature in the history of mankind. And Christopher Nolan is a really incredible director. So, Christopher Nolan directing the Odyssey, that should be the match made in heaven, right? Right? Like, one of my favorite directors directing one of the greatest pieces of literature and doing a sword and sandal epic, especially that I'm a huge fan of sword and sandal genre, actually. Like, couldn't be a better comparison, couldn't be a better combination, I mean, right? Again, one of the greatest directors, one of the greatest pieces of literature, a genre that I really love. Couldn't be better combination, correct?
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
But here we are. Like, I was losing my all of interest and excitement for Odyssey every single day. The more news I've been hearing about, like, I've been skeptical ever since the casting has been announced, but yes, the movie, I'm not even tempted to call it disappointing because I didn't really have that high expectations after all I've been hearing about it and everything, but it still managed to really disappoint me. Like, the best compliment I can give it is that it does have several good elements and it is pretty watchable, but then again, all it shows is how masterful the Odyssey is, because again, the Odyssey is so masterful that you just can't fully fuck it up, all of it, because some elements are actually bound to remain good, and that's the reason why this movie manages to at least be watchable and engaging at times. And we'll get to several good things that the movie does quite well, although again, that's only because it's based on the Odyssey why it does those things well. But let's start from where it really sucks. And obviously, first and foremost, the casting. It's just so atrocious. Like, I guess Tom Holland is okay as Telemachus. Well, I will admit that I don't think that Matt Damon, I can't say he's that bad as Odysseus actually, and I do think he clearly very much tries to do his best when it comes to acting out Odysseus' role and all, and ultimately I don't think he was ultimately that bad, but he still is definitely not my first choice to play Odysseus. But Lupita as Helen of Troy and her twin sister Clytemnestra, although she was an older sister in the original The Iliad and the Greek mythology, but they made her twin sister here just to cast the same actress, but this is simply unforgivable. This is like one of the worst casting choices in modern cinema, which says quite a lot. Actually, like, I can't believe that this is the woman that the whole Trojan War was started over. Seriously? And that's not the only thing. In general, like, when it comes to casting, especially characters in minor roles and all, it's like one of the worst things I've ever seen. It doesn't feel like Greek mythology or ancient Greece at all. It feels literally like modern day America. Forgetting that, Nolan, you aren't directing a modern America, you're directing ancient Greece, come on. And the dialogue is just so atrocious and so horribly written, like, it feels so modern, and Christopher Nolan was justifying it that he wants to make it feel more emotional as opposed to intellectual, but who cares? Like, there have plenty been of stories with a very old-fashioned dialogue, but it managed to be like very emotional. It's almost like he feels that the audiences are dumb, and And another thing is one of the scenes I was most looking forward to actually was the encounter with the Cyclops, Polyphemus, but it was so horribly done. Like the Cyclops wasn't actually done by CGI, it was done by an animatronic puppet, which on paper sounds like a great idea. Like, I'm kind of like Nolan, I really hate CGI, but this is a perfect example of sometimes when such an anti-CGI crusade can truly backfire on you, and like it did very much here, because yeah, like I'm also not a huge fan of CGI, but at the same time I believe that when it's practical to use it, by all means, use it, because the Cyclops looked basically like a generally clay animation grey monster, and it didn't look like a Cyclops at all. Like the minute it went out in the daylight, because when they were inside the cave, I can't say it actually looked all that bad, but the minute it went out in the daylight, that's when it literally started actually feeling like a claymation grey monster blob or something. It looks so atrocious, and also the whole scene is basically, Nolan claimed he wanted to make the scene feel more like out of horror, and that's why he completely removed the dialogue from the Cyclops and removed the scene where Odysseus introduces himself as nobody, but that kind of completely butchers the character of Odysseus, because the point is that Odysseus is a trickster. Like, he's so cunning and all, and him introducing himself as nobody and then tricking the Cyclops was kind of the entire point, but removing it kind of kills that. And again, Nolan claimed that he removed the dialogue because he wanted to make the scene feel more like out of a horror, but instead it felt more like a kid's Saturday morning cartoon with characters being locked in with a monster. And like then Odysseus' men basically are saying it talks, and Odysseus, well, do you talk to ants? Because they are asking him, why didn't you speak to us? Like, seriously, those are supposed to be really brave, fearless, powerful warriors, and they're asking such a silly question that little kids would ask to their parent, and then Odysseus comes off as a parent that has to school them. Jeez. And the costumes are terrible too. Like, some of them feel so generic and other ones feel so out of place. Like when I was seeing the costumes, I was even forgetting that I was technically watching a movie set in ancient Greece, and instead kinda started feeling like I was watching a 17th century colonial movie or something, because yeah, the costumes are also pretty atrocious. But as I've been saying, I can't say the movie is all bad, and you can see some people saying online that when the movie actually works, it works and it's really amazing. But do I really agree with that? Yes and no. Because this is actually the problem. Those people are forgetting that this is a movie that's based on a really excellent source material. So that's why you can't just fully 100% butcher it, because once again, the Odyssey is one of the greatest pieces of literature in the history of mankind, so if you try to adapt it, some elements are just bound to be good, because it's one of those stories that's just completely impossible to butcher, unless you remove all the elements and keep nothing but a title, but that's obviously not what Christopher Nolan has done here, because now onto some things I do think were actually pretty good. Like, I really like the portrayal of the sirens, especially I think that Christopher Nolan made a really smart choice of not showing us the sirens and instead showing them from the far distance and making it all foggy, which kinda gives them this more otherworldly, mystical, horror-like feel, which is also consistent with the Odyssey, because the horror is often the scariest and most creepy when you actually don't see it. And that's why I think Christopher Nolan executed it amazingly well with the sirens. And also I love that we don't actually hear the music, because Odysseus' men are covering their ears with wax like they did in the Odyssey, and all we see is Odysseus' agony with straggling, being tied up and all, but we never actually get to hear the song. And I think that was also a really smart choice by Christopher Nolan, because the whole point of the Song of the Sirens is that it's this mystical, tempting song that no actual real-life sound could possibly capture. So if you're actually presenting the sound, then it's bound to never ever work. So I think it was probably the best possible choice that Nolan could possibly do by not actually making us listen to the song, just show us Odysseus' agony when he's all tied up, and actually hears it. I mean, I admit, I was kind of wishing we could actually hear this song, but if anything, that shows even more bigger excellence of the scene, that you're kind of curious, but you know the situation and you don't really want to hear the song. I mean, you do want to hear it and not want to hear it, so yeah. The way that Christopher Nolan showed the sirens, I think that actually was really excellent. And now on to the next point, is because one of the scenes I was very much looking forward to ever since the movie was announced, it's one of my favorite moments, the Odyssey, is Scylla and Charybdis. And I think Charybdis was also really excellent because we only see the whirlpool. We don't actually see the monster because, yeah, Charybdis actually is technically this monster deep below the sea that sucks the water and creates this whirlpool, although some interpretations chose to just make her simply a whirlpool, nothing else. But whatever, by just showing the whirlpool without showing Charybdis, I think was another great choice Nolan has done, because again, it seems like he understands that the horror is at its most scary when you actually don't see the horror. And that's why I think that the scene with the sirens and then the scene with Charybdis works amazingly well. And I cannot say the same thing with Scylla. With Scylla, it felt kinda, again, like, it kinda felt silly, because then it's basically those several like plant-like tentacles coming out of the rocks and eating 6 of Odysseus' men, and while it's meant to be scary, it's not really, and it kind of feels awkward and comedic. So while I do think that Charybdis was executed very well, I can't say the same thing about Scylla. And what I also do like is that Odysseus isn't really here the good guy, and it seems like Christopher Nolan understood that part, because although we do see in the flashback how the whole city of Troy was butchered and all, and it's largely thanks to Odysseus because he's the guy that came up with the Trojan horse after all, but Odysseus, although he does feel a huge guilt by the end of the movie, it's not really about the fact that he slaughtered a bunch of civilians, but mostly that he desecrated lots of holy places and basically violated guest right by providing with the Trojans with this gift and then leaving the horse, opening the gates and slaughtering the whole city. But again, that's kind of the point. It's actually pretty consistent with how the ancient Greeks view heroic deeds, and also, yeah, the fact that the Christopher Nolan chosen to make Odysseus how he actually was in the Odyssey instead of a outright heroic figure, that's another thing that I do have to give him a credit for. And I also do like the side story of Telemachus and how he was learning about his father, how he saw several details about the Trojan War and all. But all in all, well, once again, there certainly are several things to love in this movie, because the things that the movie has done well has indeed done them very well, but it makes me even more depressed, because it shows that if Nolan only tried to actually follow the source material T to a T, make way more accurate outfits, way more realistic logical dialogue for the time period, and certainly much better casting choices, then it could be it could even be his magnum opus. But no. Unfortunately, Nolan, sadly, it seems like he has also bent the knee to Hollywood, unfortunately. Again, Nolan, you've been a really excellent director, and this could possibly be among your greatest works. Unfortunately,
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
you had to ruin something like that, even though, once again, if you only actually cared about what you're doing, that this, once again, could possibly be your magnum opus. But here we are, and I can only now remember the days back in the beginning of 2025 when it was announced that Christopher Nolan was directing the Odyssey, and my joy and the excitement. And if you can probably still find my old video when I'm being excited about Christopher Nolan directing the Odyssey, but again, we don't live in the normal world. Overall, I'm very disappointed with the Odyssey. I mean, disappointed, I'm not sure if it's the appropriate word, because after I've been hearing all those things about it and all, I didn't particularly have high expectations anyway. But the best compliment I can give to this movie is that it's still overall story of the Odyssey, so It is watchable because of that, and there are several really good moments, but other than that, I expected a lot more from Christopher Nolan and from the Odyssey. At least before I've been hearing all those things that the movie was doing, but I'm not happy. Although what this movie made me wanna do is rewatch Troy with Brad Pitt. Like, that movie is really great and really underrated, so yeah, I'm probably gonna go ahead and maybe like tomorrow rewatch Troy with Brad Pitt. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for checking out the review of the Odyssey. Press the like button, please subscribe this channel, and I will talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you soon, bye!